Morning. I'm Gail Spar, and I'll be your song leader for this morning. I hope that you will join us as we sing our morning songs. Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing song number 154, Now Light is Less, hymn number 54.
Of wind and rain are healed. The haze
And now take a moment, please, to greet one another before you sit down.
In the mystery of life about us, there is light. It gives us a place to be, to grow, and to rejoice together. It opens the pathways to love. In this place of friendship, there is freedom. Let the light we kindle go before us, strong in hope, strong in goodwill, inviting the day to come.
And I'm asking Sally to light the candle over here today. This is our candle of memory for Rebecca Bell, a member of long-standing who died this Tuesday morning, that was September 18th, after a brief illness. We offer our condolences to her husband, Joe James, her daughters, Sasha and Minka Reed, as well as her many friends. A celebration of life will be held for Rebecca on October 20th at 2 p.m. here in the Fun Sanctuary. And now I'd like to invite you to join your hearts and minds in the spirit of worship with this poem by Marge Piercy. The people I love the best jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real.
I woke up with a head full of steam. Henry got up, and he was feeling full of steam that morning, too. He went outside, he sniffed around. It is a good day to walk to work. So he walked down across the pond, and he saw a whole lot of comfrey plants. And he got down and started digging one up, and Channing walked by with his fishing pole. And Channing says, "You're not doing anything today, Henry. Why don't you come fishing with me?" He said, "Oh, no," said Henry, "I'm walking to work." And he got the comfrey plant and he put it in his hat. He went to the top of the hill and he looked in the distance, and he was very excited to see some rain clouds because it had been a dry, hot summer. And he thought, "Oh, good, the rain is going to come this afternoon." And as he went down the hill and the fields, he saw some milkweed covered with butterflies, but they were very dry, the milkweed. He said, "Oh, even though it's going to rain," he went down, had a cup in his pocket, took it out, got water, and watered the milkweed plants. Hosmer came by and said, "So, Henry, are you a storm cloud today?" He said, No, I'm walking to work today." Well, he wanted to walk across that brook, and so he got a big stick from a big pine tree, and he put some of the pine twigs in his hat, there with a comfrey, and he took that stick and he pushed one of the stones in the brook, and then he pushed another one, and then he pushed another one to make 3 perfect stepping stones so he could walk across the brook. And as he walked through the woods, he saw a fox den with some chicken feathers around the edge. Came out by Hosmer's house. And Mrs. Hosmer was sitting inside, but right next to an open window, and he yelled in, "Mrs. Hosmer, you better keep the chickens in tonight. There's a fox nearby." And he put a sprig of that sweet-smelling pine on her windowsill. Well, he was in town now, and he saw the postmaster, who was kind of limping along, really having a trouble time walking. And the postmaster said, "Henry, you're not doing anything. Could you take this envelope down to Emerson?" And Henry said, No, I'm walking to work today, but I could drop off the letter on the way. And he took out the comfrey out of his hat and gave it to him, said, "This'll help soothe your foot." Well, he found Emerson in his garden. And Emerson said, after he took the letter, he said, "Oh my gosh, there are woodchucks here, and they have been eating all of my plants. I don't know what to do about it." Henry says, "No problem." He sat over the other end of the garden very quietly, and he took out his flute, and he started to play it. And the curious little hedgehogs came up, and he just scooped them up and put them in his pockets. He says, "Oh, I'll take them to the other side of that wood over there." So he carries them through the woods, walking along to work. Gets the other side, he's in Alcott's field. He bends over, he lets out the little, I said hedgehogs, and they're woodchucks, so they're not the same things. They were woodchucks. They run off, but then he sees there's some strawberry plants, wild strawberry plants, lots of them. They're not bearing strawberries. This is the fall. But he digs them, one of them, just one of them out, puts it in his pocket, and walks by the Alcott's house. Now, May Alcott is out there hanging out the laundry, and he says, May, you want to take your laundry in, not hang it out. It's going to rain in an hour. She says, twice washed. It's the best kind of laundry. And he walks along until it does start raining. It starts pouring. And he thinks, oh, well, it's raining anyway. So he goes right into the Mill Creek, walks right inside. He's going to get wet anyway, right? And he takes his stick and he starts measuring the shallows. Well, old Flint is sitting there on the side and says, taking a bath, Henry? No, he says, what do you think he says? I'm walking to work. He says, I'm walking to work. And he walks on down the river until he sees a huckleberry bush, huge huckleberry bush that he didn't even know was there, and he knew where every plant was. So he got out of the brook, and he went underneath, and he cleared out some of it, and he found huckleberries way at the bottom. All the rest were gone, and he fished by the pond. And there's Channing with a big basket full of fish, and he says, look what I got today. I did a lot of fish, and how was your day? And Henry says, well, I'm still walking to work, but I'm almost there. And he says, Channing goes, well, what do you do for work? He says, well, I'm a writer. Oh. So he walks in his cabin, and he's been taking care of things all day long in the woods and in the town. He takes off his hat and his coat, hangs them up to dry. He sits down at his desk, takes out some paper and a pen, and he writes, today I took a walk in the woods. And so ends our story, and we're going to be singing the boys and the children out to church school. The song is on the inside cover of your gray hymnal.
Good morning. My name is Sally Winkle, and I am a member of this congregation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this sanctuary, and those joining us online, welcome to you as well. In order to reach a wider community than those able to be physically present here on Sunday mornings, our services are live streamed on YouTube and Facebook, with the exception of Joys and Concerns, which are not recorded nor live streamed. Before I continue, please let me remind you to silence your cell phones. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation, we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We deepen our relationship as we create a compassionate, welcoming community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. We ask that you wear the paper name tags because it helps us recognize that you're someone that we would like to meet. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you may find it here. Whether you're new to Unitarian Universalism or visiting from another UU congregation, we invite you to stop by the welcome table after the service to have any questions answered. People become members of this congregation by signing the membership book and supporting the church with their time and their finances. If you are considering joining the church, please talk to our assistant minister, Miss Denise Gouch, after the service. Following this service, we hope that everyone will enjoy coffee and fellowship in the social area, where you will also find information about the current opportunities for engagement and reflection. There are a number of announcements in the weekly bulletin, so I hope that you take them home and read them. Thank you.
I invite you now to take a moment and settle in your seats. Finish arriving here and feel how good it is to be together this morning. And as you know yourself here in this community, you may also become aware of things you bring here from your week, moments of joy, moments of sorrow, worries, concerns. And if you have a joy or a sorrow that has moved you profoundly that you would like to make present in the sanctuary, you're invited to come forward and place a stone in the bowl of water. Our lay minister, Gloria Ballard, will help you with that. If you would like your joy or sorrow spoken, you can find a yellow slip of paper in the pew in front of you. If you would fill that out and hand it to me as you come forward, Gloria and I will read those. Holding all of these that have been spoken, plus the things that lie unspoken in our hearts, let us join in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose, We turn our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to bring into our circle of concern all who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who are in pain, either in body or in spirit, those who are lonely, those who've been wronged. We are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. Grateful for the miracle of consciousness that we share, we seek to use this consciousness in the power to remember, to love, and to care. Amen. May we be so. Every week during our service, we have a time when we take up offerings to support the mission of this church. Every month, we also share a portion of that collection with an organization in our community that shares our values and furthers our mission. This month, the Share the Plate recipient is the Fun Action Team for Room in the Inn, which is a citywide organization that works to address homelessness. You can read more about it in your order of service. As the ushers come forward, I would like to remind you that we have ways to give online. You can always consult www.thefun, that's FUUN.org, or if you want to use your mobile device, there are a few suggestions in the order of service about ways of doing that. As always, your contributions, your generosity are appreciated, as is your presence here with us.
Good morning. Well, I love Marge Piercy's poem To Be of Use that Gail read. Every time I hear it, I think of my daddy. I brought my tissue just in case. He's gone 8.5 years now, but in my mind's ear, I can still hear the sharp crack of the footrest of his lazy boy recliner popping as he stood up to get to work. Daddy was a quiet, modest man, and also the CEO of a large company. His hobbies were watching sports and news, being with family, and going to Hardee's each morning to meet his friends for breakfast. And he always had work to do, tasks at home that needed doing, things that needed fixing. Daddy enjoyed that recliner, but I think growing up on a farm in West Tennessee, he was used to seeing what needed to be done and doing it. So some snapshots from my mental picture album of Daddy. Getting in my car to drive home from a visit at their house and noticing that my car had been washed and vacuumed when I wasn't looking. Daddy driving to my house in Franklin to fix my mower or a leaky faucet while I was a single grad school student working full-time with 2 teenagers. Mowing the large lawn of the home I grew up in an old worn-out suit. Hacking through the stony backyard ground to bury our family dog, Star, at the height of the August heat while our entire extended family stood by. He unwittingly chopped through a poison ivy root, and we all caught poison ivy. Daddy was the sickest with it and ran the highest fever. Up on a ladder to clean the gutters, wash the windows, or spray a wasp nest. At the edge of our property, cleaning out of a sewer grate what had backed up the toilets in our house. Again. Daddy, to my knowledge, never hesitated to take on a dirty, nasty, sweaty task, nor did he try to pass one off to anyone else. He just quietly took care of what needed to be done. I learned through his example that doing all kinds of work was just a part of life and what we do each day. It's not a big deal to get our hands dirty. It's okay to get sweaty. It's just fine to do something that's truly gross. It is needful. People in my family do all kinds of work. One is a high-powered salesman who earns a whole lot of money. Several are teachers. One bags groceries and cleans bathrooms. Daddy would be the best cheerleader for each one. I am so grateful for how Daddy passed from this life. He woke up one morning to go to breakfast at Hardee's, and he just collapsed and died instantly. He was used up. This was a blessing for him, as he would have been quite unhappy if he couldn't be of use. Thank you.
Won't you please stand in body or in spirit and sing along with hymn number 1053 in your turquoise hymnal, How Could Anyone? So, as we move into a time of
find yourself comfortably in this spot. You may want to close your eyes or soften your gaze. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel yourself in your seat. And hear these words that we heard Gail read from Marge Piercy. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. So consider how you feel about taking on the common and often dirty tasks of everyday life. Do you enjoy these tasks? Do you wish they'd go away? Would you prefer that someone else take care of them? Let us move into the silence.
people thirst, they cry for work that is real. Well, what in the world does that mean? What is real work, right? Henry David Thoreau, who this story was really about, that whole story about Henry is written with beautiful pictures of a cute little bear, but it all is taken from his writings, every word of it. And at the ending, he's writing the beginning of Walden, which nobody read 150 years ago when he published it. So he could have had that conversation that many of us who are in writers or artists have had. So what do you do? What's your work? Oh, well, I'm a writer. Well, have you published? Yeah, but did you make any money? Oh, well, no, actually, I've only sold 4 books to my best friends. And then he thought his work was really, he didn't even think it was a writer. It was just that he knew a lot of writers and they told him he was a writer, like Emerson. But what he really thought he was a naturalist. And it even took longer for people to recognize that that was real work. Nobody read his naturalist writings for 125 years. Now they use them as a prototype for a lot of ecological research. And it's very, very considered real work. And people in his town were totally confused about him because he was one of the few people in that town that got to go to college. Now, very few people in those days went to college. And if you went to college, you became a preacher, a teacher, a doctor, or a lawyer. That was it in those days. And he didn't become any of them. For a little, do corporal punishment, which was considered the only way to keep the kids in line. And then they couldn't understand, why didn't he run his father's business? His father had a pencil factory. And he tried. He even invented a better pencil. But he was a terrible businessman. He hated it. So he was basically job shamed his whole life. Now, I just learned the word job, the phrase job shamed on social media, because recently there was an actor, Jeffrey, I know his last name, Jeffrey Owens, right. Jeffrey Owens, he was in 44 episodes of The Cosby Show. He was I think it was the oldest sister's boyfriend, and then they got married. He was a doctor in it, very good job. He had a picture taken, somebody took a picture of him working at Trader Joe's in New Jersey, bagging groceries, and he had on, his Trader Joe's shirt, and his name, Jeffrey Owen, was on it, and Fox Entertainment made a big deal about, this poor guy, he was an actor, and look at this terrible downfall bagging groceries. Well, a lot of people on social media criticized that point of view, calling it job shaming. And he went on Good Morning America, and he said, don't feel sorry for me. I've had a great life. I get to act sometimes. I've been pretty steady, but I also like working at Trader Joe's. It brings in money for my family when I don't have an acting gig. And he said, all jobs are important. Not one job is of greater worth or more valuable than another. All jobs are valuable. All jobs are worthwhile. Now, he introduced this idea of what we think is worth. What we think is valuable. And unfortunately, many people, when they're told their job is not worthwhile, it's not valuable, they think people are shaming them, saying, you're not worthwhile. You are not of value. We live in a culture in which money is often idolized. It is often the highest value for people. And so people tend to be conditioned to value someone more if they earn more money, and less if they earn less. We've all noticed that happening at times, especially when it's someone we love that is being shamed. For instance, some of us know a young man who had not terrible but slight developmental disabilities. He struggled with a lot of help in the special needs teachers who, by the way, are paid next to nothing, was able to graduate from high school. And he was clear. He really tried to see if he could do college-level work. He couldn't. So he got a job. He got what to him was a good job. And he's been working for 6 years as a grocery bagger and often is asked to clean the toilets at the grocery store. Now, this is necessary work, especially the cleaning the toilets, but because many of us bag our own groceries, but many people really, it's a real service to have someone bag your groceries, and some people really need you to carry them out to the car. So when he's there, he's happy. He enjoys doing this work. He does it well. He enjoys interacting with people, right? But then every once in a while, all too regularly, actually, someone will say, "You're a nice young man. You don't need to be doing this. You should go to college." Now, they're being well-meaning, right? But the person feels they know they can't go to college. They know that this is a good job for them, and they feel shamed. And of course, they feel not of worth. They feel not worth love. Not worth love. And the people who love him can't tell him otherwise, right? Because the whole culture feeds that to him. Now, there's another thing that happens that reinforces these words. Because maybe you could say, "Oh, well, they're wrong. They don't really know what they're talking about." But the truth is, he is not paid enough to live on. After 6 years of being an excellent employee, he makes between $11 and $12 an hour. That's not enough to live on. It takes $15.50 is the latest figure per hour with some benefits that is considered a living wage in this area right now. So if you're not paid enough to live on, what does that say about your worth? Is it saying it's not worth you living? On some level, I know people who are not paid enough to live on feel that. And it's systematic. It's worked into our system. Now, this judging of worth, we as a congregation covenant, among many things, to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And so I'd like to suggest that this is one way we can affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person by affirming and promoting the best we can the support of people who are in jobs that don't pay enough for them to live on, and, if you can, by working to create a wage floor. In other words, changing that system, which is unjust. Okay. Just recently, I won't go recently, about 4 years ago, I went to the first meeting of a coalition of groups here in Nashville. It was a wide variety of groups that were all concerned with a status of employment in Nashville for the lowest paid workers. You have to understand that this is the fastest growing segment of workers, lowest paid service workers, but also in the South, it also includes some skilled workers like construction workers. And so there were people from TIRC, our Tennessee Immigrant Refugee Rights. There was people from NOAA, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, which this church belongs. There were people from Jobs for Justice, which was on the board of for about 6 years at that time. And there were people from different unions. And they joined together, and we all went around to tell why we were there. and we all had a similar story. So I'm going to tell you the story I told, and then just say that this is a pattern that every single person talked about. So I told the story of when this congregation was asked by students at Vanderbilt to be involved, and this was like 10, 11 years ago, in a fair wage campaign for their service workers, who were people who worked in the cafeteria, the grounds, and the cleaners. And they wanted to unionize. They had voted to unionize, and Vanderbilt was pushing back. The students were pushing for them, the administration, to accept that. And I have to say, many of I was grateful that many Vanderbilt alumni wrote and said they withhold their donations to Vanderbilt if they did not settle. I think it was one thing that helped tip it. And the administration did accept the workers being in a union and raised their pay to what was then a living wage, the entry pay to a living wage. As soon, and I wasn't paying attention, I found out about a year later, as soon as people stopped paying attention, they laid everybody off who was joined the union and hired outside contract companies to fill these jobs and to fill them at a much lower rate. And one way they did it at a much lower rate was to call them seasonal workers. So they laid them all off at some point a month every year and rehired people. Okay. So every group, however, had stories like this, where progress was made with companies or private companies, because Vanderbilt is a private institution, who had the money, quite honestly, who were in good financial condition, who did this, who contracted out to lower paid groups. And so we formed a group called Stand Up Nashville, and Noah is a member of Stand Up Nashville. And we just had our first win, almost 4 years later, where we signed on the line with the Ingram Group to have a community benefits agreement for the development around the soccer stadium on the fairground. Now, the communities involved, all of us who live in Nashville were involved. We've got this, the fairground is our land, it's public land. And so a community benefits agreement is designed to, they're getting the benefit of using the land, so, your project should benefit the community as well. And I have to say, the Ingram Group, they were behind this. I mean, it was tough negotiating, and I must say, I really admire the people who negotiated. But overall, they were people who were in this community, who cared for the community, and wanted the best for the community. And they were not in it just for themselves. And you'll hear more about this over time, but the two agreements in this that I wanted to mention today was, one of them is that they set a wage floor. Anyone in the Ingram Group who, anybody they hire at the soccer stadium will start at $15.50. And they will actually hire somebody to recruit those people from the poorest, they call them promise zones, 6 poorest areas in Nashville. And so they will at least make sure people know about this, who $15.50 will bring them to a livable wage when they did not have that option. Okay. The other thing that they did, we have a lot more work to do, but the other thing they did is they made an agreement that for subcontractors, which they will be using for some of for the building, all the contractors use subcontractors. We're at such a low level here in Nashville that the best we could get, which was considered really good, was not wage parity from subcontractors, but they will actually obey OSHA federal safety rules, which many of the subcontractors here in town do not, and that's why we have a very high rate of workers' deaths, much higher than national here in Nashville. And they also will promise to pay the people at all, We have a high rate of wage theft in Nashville, and so the fact that they're saying you cannot subcontract anybody who will not do wage theft is considered a big win. Sorry, but it is. So, so the reason, as we did the research on this, that this kind of work is so important is that researchers, so let me, 4 universities were asked to work with the Social Security Department. They did this research on why there was a widening gap between the richest and the poorest people in terms of pay in the country in the last 40 years. It's been consistently widening. And what exactly were the dynamics that were causing that? And what they found was 1/3 of that gap could be explained by companies hiring subcontractors at lower levels. 1/3. Now, in 1980 is when they start. Before that, the minimum wage was considered a wage floor. It was considered a living wage. It was considered important to do that, even though market forces might force the wages down. And why is that? It's because when we're paying sub-living wage, the community pays for those people. The community, and we saw this at Vanderbilt, we had people working 40 hours a week plus at Vanderbilt who were living in shelters, who had to have food stamps, were getting medical care that was indigent care. The community pays for private corporations to do substandard pay. And so that was why there was an agreement in the United States in the 60s and 70s to have a wage floor. It was better for the common good. Okay. So as they look at that, of course, they ended up asking a question. Is there a way to create a wage floor again that is higher than market forces? Because since 1980, they have not raised the minimum wage anywhere near fast enough to hit inflation, and so it's considered way below. It's barely half of the wage floor in most of the country, and of course we have no minimum wage in Tennessee, so we rely on the national one, which is it's 7-something, so it's just a little less than half. Okay, so Harvard University was one of the universities that was studying that, and they also were having a big student rebellion to support their service workers, their lowest paid service workers, to be in a union and to get a living wage. And at that point, Larry Summers, who worked for the Federal Reserve and helped with the buyout plans after the crash in 2007-08. He worked for Obama, but he was president of Harvard then. He was a very wealthy man. He worked in the financial sector for many years. And he said, Harvard is kind of one of the wealthiest private institutions in the world, so why don't we test this out? We can actually afford to test this out. So they created a parity plan. They settled with the unions. Everybody starts, their service workers, which includes the guards there, at minimum wage. But they said, we will use contract workers for certain things, but they have to be in parity with what we're paying and our benefits. And they had fabulous benefits. So now, and that was in 2002, they did that. So now, 16 years later, there are literally hundreds of people who might have graduated from high school, certainly never graduated from college, who used to be living in poverty. I mean, literally hundreds of people who are now middle class. Now, what does middle class mean? In America right now, it has meant different things at different times. Right now, when you read the economic stuff and they're talking about having a living wage, middle class means you have access to health care. You could buy a house if you wanted to in the area where you live. Doesn't have to be the fanciest house, but you could buy something that you could help your kids get an education beyond public schools if they wanted it, and you could have a vacation, 2-week vacation a year, and you had the possibility of retirement. That now is considered middle class. In all those years, the middle class, there are fewer people in the middle class, more in the impoverished, and the middle class has not raised its living. It's pretty much the same as it was in 1980. No improvement, and that's counting that now most people have 2 people in their family working instead of 1, so it really is lower. Okay. So I don't know, so you might be bored listening to all this, but I wanted to say they tried it, it's worked great, and it's worked for the contractors to be able to pay this, the subcontractors. And so they have some track record to show that we could work for have a wage floor higher than market forces, that it was good for the community. There's less need for services for those people, of course. So I just want to end this by asking every one of you to think about what your knee-jerk reaction is. For instance, do you, when one family in this church recently, their son didn't want to go to college. He wanted to go to learn to be an auto mechanic. And some people's knee-jerk reaction was, that's terrible. But we all know, we all need auto mechanics. And he really appreciated those here who supported him in that. When we go to when we go have our groceries bagged, or when we have somebody doing the dirty work around our house, or when we are doing the dirty work ourselves, do we feel valued? Do we value the work they do? And do we let them know it? So even though we can't all work to actively work to raise the wage floor, we can all actively look at our attitudes and how we support those we love and those we don't know who are doing work that does not pay them enough to live. May it be so.
Our closing hymn is in your gray hymnals. It's number 131, Love Will Guide Us. 131, please rise in body and spirit. Please remain standing.
Please join me in reciting the words at the bottom of your program for the chalice extinguishing. We extinguish this flame,
but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I'd like to close with these words by Gary Kowalski. We share our common dreams, homes and schools where children thrive, neighborhoods that are safe and clean, a city rich in colors and cultures, an economy where no one is expendable, a beloved community where rich and poor alike have access to the opportunity for a dignified and productive life. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples where our deepest hope is to be of service to this world. Enable us as we leave this place to carry forth this prayer into the coming week, turning our thoughts toward charity, our hearts towards justice, and our hands toward the work that needs to be done. This service is over. Let our service begin again, renewed.